Hey everyone, it's Allie, and today we're back with another build guide for the launch of Last Epoch. Now, I am very excited about this build, not only because it's looking to be a very unique and interesting take on an old build, but at the same time, this is also going to be the build that I will personally be playing for the launch of Season 1. Today, we're going to be talking about Umbral Blades Falconer. Now, this build is going to be a new take on an old skill, Umbral Blades Blademaster, which in my opinion is not only just going to be faster, tankier, and straight up do more damage through all of the new fun tools that we have access to through Falconer. This build is going to be a monolith terror, and it's going to absolutely destroy early game monoliths, as well as it having a super easy playstyle, which in my opinion is going to be great for new players, and at the same time having a very easy time with gear, requiring no specific uniques to get going, with us having one specific unique, Cradle the Erase, which will take this build from very strong to straight up broken in terms of being able to live everything. This build is going to be very fun because, well, our mobility skill, Aerial Assault, is going to also be our main DPS. The point of this build is going to be that Aerial Assault through Twilight Strike is going to automatically cast Umbral Blades for you, not only allowing us to scale the cooldown of Aerial Assault as much as we can, giving us a very good mobility skill that's going to have low cooldown, but at the same time making this build substantially less clunky to play, as we will not have to ever actually cast Umbral Blades ourselves. I am unbelievably excited for this build simply due to how easy it's going to be put together and how easy of a build it's going to be to play, especially since the leveling is going to be a breeze as we get to basically play our build from the get-go. And because I think it's going to be such an easy build to follow, I think a lot of people are going to also enjoy it themselves. Now, before we do go any further here, I do want to give you a disclaimer. Obviously, we haven't been able to play Falconer in-game yet, so I cannot personally validate all this to you, but I've seen quite a lot of closed beta testing of this build, and this build in beta did look absolutely amazing, and it's going to straight up tear through monoliths with no problem. The other thing to mention here is obviously this isn't released yet, and we haven't seen the patch notes yet. And because we haven't seen patch notes, we do not know what could change. Now, I do want to point out that two things about Falconer that this build uses have already been buffed. And because you're looking to buff things, I don't see much of a reason for anything here being nerfed or drastically changed before the season actually launches. Falconer is a new mastery that we haven't been able to play yet, and because a lot of people are excited about it, I don't think they're going to make Falconer not very viable at the start of the season, as this is a big selling point for 1.0. Now, before we go any further, I do want to mention that this build guide will be accompanied by a massive written guide as well. I've tried to put my heart and soul into this to make sure that this is going to have absolutely every single bit of information that you need about playing this build, and if you want a little bit more information, or if you'd like to get a refresher on anything that we cover in this video, you can find it here. One thing that I want to mention about this written guide is that unfortunately it will not be available the moment this build goes out. Unfortunately, at this point, it is out of my hands, and I simply just have to wait for the people who run Last Epoch tools to actually approve the guide, which currently is proving to be a little bit finicky simply due to them not wanting any Warlock or Falconer builds to be released before launch. Believe me, I am trying to do everything I can, and as soon as the written guide is live, I will update the link in the description below, and I'll make a pinned comment in the comment section as well. Believe me what I'm saying, I'm trying to do everything I can to make sure this will be out before 1.0, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that happens. Now, what you'll be able to look at immediately today is going to be the build planner for this. This build planner is going to include all the gear that you'd want for this build, as well as all the skills that you'd want and the passive skill tree progressions that you'd want to use for every single skill. This should get you all the way there in terms of being able to figure out how to put the skills together, and the passive tree section in the build planner will also have a passive tree progression in it that will allow you to very easily see exactly how to put your passive points into the passive tree. And finally, there will also be an accompanying loot filter with all this. This loot filter has been handmade by me to make sure that it gives you the absolute easiest time possible with leveling this build. It'll include everything they need to see while leveling, as well as it having an endgame section to filter, meaning that this filter should basically do all the work from level 1 all the way to level 100, and this should take care of any need for a filter. Now that we've gotten all that out of the way, why don't we first start talking about how to actually level this build? So unfortunately, we cannot immediately play our build. As one, we need to get to level 15 to unlock Umbral Blades, which will be manually self-casting up until level 35, where we finally unlock Aerial Assault. Aerial Assault is where this build is going to really come online. It's going to be the point where our build is going to be substantially more simplified and easier to play. To get to level 15 for Umbral Blades, we'll be playing as Puncture. Puncture is a really great bleed skill that is going to do really great damage at low levels, making our experience level 15 a absolute breeze. Now, I do need to spell this out as obviously as I can. Please make sure you pick up a bow to play Puncture. Puncture can be played as a melee skill, and we really do not want to play this as a melee skill, as the bow version is just substantially more superior than the melee version. In terms of the passive tree for Puncture, since we're not going to be playing it very long, there really isn't much we need to pick up here. First, we're going to be putting 2 points into Perforate, which is going to give us a little bit of bleed chance, allowing us to stack a little bit faster. And more importantly, it's going to give us access to Blood First, which we're going to be putting 4 points into. And by the time we finish putting our 4th point in, we'll finally be level 15, allowing us to swap over to Umbral Blades. Now, Umbral Blades is not only going to be the bread and butter of this build, but it's also going to be the skill that we're going to be choosing to level with as a self-cast skill until we can finally swap over to Aerial Assault. Umbral Blades is going to be very easy to scale, simply because all of our damage is going to specifically come from Lethal Darkness, which is going to allow every single hit of Umbral Blades to apply a stack of Shadow Daggers. Shadow Daggers and Umbral Blades applying said Shadow Daggers is going to be where all the damage in this build is going to come from. What Shadow Daggers does is once you reach 4 stacks of it, it's going to consume all the stacks to deal a massive hit. Not only does this hit always critically strike, but it has a 450% effectiveness of added damage tied to it, meaning it's going to do a silly amount of damage if you give it even a tiny little bit of added damage. This is going to be very simple to do simply because Shadow Dagger has both the melee and the throwing tags on it at the same time. This means that we can then stack a lot of added damage on our weapon, while at the same time getting throwing damage on our belt, our boots, our relic, and our amulet, and get the hybrid throwing damage and reduced mana cost roll on our rings. Now, before we go any further, I need to stress to you how important this hybrid mana roll is going to actually be on your rings. This is going to massively reduce the cost of Umbral Blades, making it substantially easier on your mana. And later on, once we pick up net and add net into our build, is going to be crucial for you to be able to overcome the massive mana cost of several tricks. With all this added damage everywhere, the damage of Shadow Daggers is going to be very high and you'll easily be able to hit for thousands. Now, in terms of the Umbral Blades skill tree, it's going to be very simple. First off, we want to immediately rush Lethal Darkness, and I need to make this very clear to you that you need to have a dagger once you swap over to Umbral Blades, as Lethal Darkness will only work if you have a dagger equipped. Then after we pick up Lethal Darkness to get our Shadow Daggers online, we are then going to pick up Cacophony of Steel, which is going to turn our Umbral Blades into a Blade Storm, which will do quite a lot of hits very quickly in a specific location, meaning that each of these Blade Storms will apply Shadow Dagger stacks very quickly. When we combine Steel Torrent and Precision Cuts, which are going to give us a massive amount of extra area, while at the same time allowing us to specifically target the Umbral Blades exactly where we want them to go, we will have very easy clear that's going to feel very comfortable. Lastly, what we want to do in the tree is going to be to pick up Twilight Assault, which is going to allow us to put down 3 Umbral Blades at once, greatly increasing our damage. This should be everything you need to be able to get to Area Assault, and then the rest of your points can simply just follow the skill tree progression that's going to be both in the written guide and in the build planner for this build. The other thing to mention about this is going to be Falconry. Falconry is going to be a skill that you immediately unlock for just becoming a Falconeer, and it's going to give you a little cute falcon pet that you can immediately specialize into at level 20, and it's going to make leveling up to 34 very, very easy to do. Falconry is going to both be a passive, which allows your pet to be with you at all times, which is also just immune to all damage, but it's also going to give you active, which makes your falcon rapidly strike in a targeted area, giving you a decent amount of damage. Our falcon is immediately going to do quite a lot of damage due to Falconeer's Journey, giving it 1% more damage per level and 1% more damage per dexterity, which we should have a large amount of, as well as us then being able to pick up Train to Hunt, Go for the Eyes, and Expose Weakness, allowing our falcon to do quite a large amount of crits. Finally, our falcon later on is going to give us Hunter Spoils, which is going to give us quite a lot of health on hits, keeping us very healthy, and we're going to pick up Wake of Wings, which is going to give us a lot of movement speed every single time the falcon attacks. Once we finally do get to level 34, we'll be able to pick up Aerial Assault, and we're going to immediately go up, pick up 1 point in Twilight Strike and 1 point in Plume Daggers, and this is going to fully unlock the build for us, allowing us to turn our build from a build where we have to manually press Umbral Strike into a build where we are simply going to be using Aerial Assault as our mobility skill, giving us amazing clear. Now, the next thing I want to go over are going to be the mechanics behind this build and how to actually play this build. So, to start off by how to actually play this, it's going to be very, very simple. The main bread and butter is going to be Aerial Assault, proccing free Umbral Blades through Twilight Strike for us. These Umbral Blades are going to use our passive skill tree for it, meaning that they are going to be Blade Storms. The point of this build is that we are going to be stacking quite a lot of cooldown reduction, and when we add that on top of Skyward Soup, we are going to be able to get ourselves very, very low cooldown Aerial Assaults. The reason for this being is that every time Aerial Assault finishes and you get to the end of the dash, it's going to do a burst, and that burst will benefit from Skyward Swoop, meaning, for example, if you Aerial Assault on top of a pack of 5 monsters, you'll immediately get half of the cooldown of Aerial Assault back. This means you could potentially do back-to-back Aerial Assaults if you do use it into a very crowded pack of monsters, giving you potentially some very silly mobility, while at the same time making a very large amount of Umbral Blades all over the place, which are going to explode and proc quite a lot of Shadow Daggers. The other thing to add onto all this is going to be net. Now, net is going to be a very, very fun skill to add onto this. Not only is it going to give us great utility through things such as weakening threads and entangle weapons, reducing all generic damage the enemy does and further reducing the physical damage of it, but we're also going to get leading the hunt, which is going to give us 10% more damage against slowed enemies. But we're also going to be able to pick up Net Trap, which is going to turn Net from just a skill that we would throw out at enemies into a amazing way to proc a lot of free punctures through Spear Trap. What we're going to be doing is we're going to pick up several tricks, meaning we can always throw out 3 traps at once, and then every time those traps explode after a very quick 0.4-second arming time, is that they're going to immediately cast 3 punctures for us. Now, the punctures are going to then use our skill tree, meaning we can get some very broken passive points for puncture that have never really been considered for other builds before. First off, for puncture, we're going to be able to pick up Splinter, which is going to give us a way to reduce the physical res of enemies, allowing us to do even greater damage to Shadow Daggers, while at the same time being able to pick up Shatter. Shatter is going to then give us a way to apply Armor Shred with these, while at the same time making any Armor Shred applied by puncture specifically be 50% stronger. With us stacking a bunch of Armor Shred chance on a lot of our gear, that means that these punctures, since we have 3 of them, are going to easily be able to apply anywhere between 5 to 10 Armor Shred stacks every single time we press net, giving us a very large amount of additional damage, especially since Armor Shred is specifically better for physical damage, which we are a physical damage build. And that is not it. If you thought puncture was already good enough and net was already good enough, it gets only better. We are also going to be able to pick up Death's Imprint, allowing each of the punctures that we do to apply a Shadow Dagger. That means every time we throw net and the net traps go off and apply 3 punctures for us, those 3 punctures are immediately going to give us 3/4 of a Shadow Dagger application. And since we will be able to spam net very quickly due to its very high base attack speed and due to us stacking throwing attack speed anyways, we are going to be able to proc quite a lot of Shadow Daggers on our own. The very quick TLDR of this build, since there are quite a lot of interactions and quite a lot of mechanics going on here, is very, very simple. I don't want people to take away from this that this build is going to be some sort of complex build where you need to know everything that's going to happen. All that we're going to be doing, as I mentioned, is just aerial assaulting, and that's going to basically do all the work for you. This is going to be a build where you just spam your utility skill, and ideally, you're going to want to make sure that you end your aerial assault on top of a pack of monsters to get a lot of cooldown back from Skyward Soup. The only other thing you ever have to consider is then potentially pressing a bunch of nets if an enemy doesn't die. Not only will net be a good way to reduce their damage, but it'll proc a bunch of free punctures for you, dealing more damage. Now, with all that said, there is one more skill we haven't discussed yet, which is going to give us quite a lot of utility in this build, and is going to make it so we have substantially better clear. And that is going to be Falconry. Falconry, not only is it going to passively give you a falcon that's going to fight alongside you, but it's also going to give you an active skill, which is going to make said falcon dash between a bunch of enemies within a very large radius around you, doing quite a lot of damage. This falcon is going to have a lot of damage built into it simply because Falconeer's Journey is going to give it 1% more damage per level and 1% more damage per dexterity, meaning at a high-end setup, the falcon is just going to do 200% more damage. But at the same time, through Train to Hunt, through Go for the Eyes, and through Exposed Weakness, your falcon is just going to get 75% of any sort of generic damage you are scaling, 75% of any crit chance that you have, meaning that your falcon should be very close to 100% crit chance, as well as it benefiting from 125% of your critical strike multiplier, meaning that your falcon should have somewhere around 600 to 700% critical strike multiplier at a high end. Your falcon is not only going to go around and auto attack, but it will also have Feather Knives, which is going to be a AoE that's going to do on a 10-second cooldown, which is going to be greatly reduced by Sky Chaser due to us stacking quite a lot of throwing attack speed. With all this put together, your falcon alone should be able to clear most things in monoliths as is, and you don't even need to actually proc any sort of Shadow Daggers from Aerial Assault or Umbral Blades. To add on to all the utility that the falcon is going to give us, it's also going to apply Falconeer's Mark to everything, and through Wake of Wings, we are going to just get a permanent 15% increase at movement speed at all times. The final thing and the real kicker of Falcon is going to be Hunter's Spoils, which is going to heal you for 1 health per 2 total attributes that you have. And given that in this build, we're going to be able to have up to 140 total attributes, meaning that the Falcon, every time it kills an enemy, is going to just heal us for a lot. And then on bosses, no matter what the Falcon does, it's just going to immediately heal us for 70 health on every single auto that it does. Now, to add on to all this, why don't we talk about the gear that you're going to want in this build? So the very nice thing about all the gear for this is that we do not need any unique except for one specific shield, which is going to be very simple to actually obtain. So the first thing that I want to mention about stats is going to be cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction is unbelievably important in this build, as since Aerial Assault is going to be where the majority of our Shadow Dagger applications are going to come from, we need to reduce the cooldown of it as much as we can. That is why you need to make sure that whatever pair of boots and whatever belts that you're using in this build has cooldown reduction on it. It's the single most important role on these items, and you do not want to use a belt or a pair of boots that do not have cooldown on it. Not only that, but it's also going to reduce the cooldown of Falconry, allowing us to get some pretty decent clear just out of the base damage of it that it does due to the Falcon having such high damage through it scaling off all of our stats. It doesn't matter if your movement speeds don't have movement speed, for example, or any other useful rolls. And the same goes for your belts. Just please make sure you get as much cooldown reduction as you can. All of the gear for this build is just going to be a lot of generic exalted items where we are going to try and get dexterity on every single roll that we possibly can. This build is going to scale incredibly well off of any additional dexterity you give it. First off, not only does your Falcon's melee attacks and your Falcon's throwing attacks get scaled from dexterity through both your Falconeer Mastery passive bonus and through Agile Hunt, but at the same time, through Relentless Talents, your Falcon is going to heal you for a flat amount per point of dexterity that you have, meaning that the more dexterity you have, the better your overall recovery is going to be, given that this is going to work on anything that is related to your Falcon's damage. That means Aerial Assault will heal you every time you press it. Your Falcon running around and hitting things will make you heal every time it does damage. And every time you press Falconry as an active skill, you'll just immediately heal for a few hundred health. The final thing here is going to be Simpleton Feathers, which is going to give you 6 armor per 2 dexterity, allowing us to get a pretty chunky amount of extra armor in this build at no extra cost. Due to that, dexterity is going to be the single most important stat that you want to get on all of your gear. And because dexterity can roll on pretty much every single piece of gear except on a belt and on an amulet, you want to make sure you get it everywhere you can. The other really important roll here is going to be the physical penetration with Shadow Daggers that can roll both on your helmet and on your body armor. This is going to give you basically the majority of your physical penetration, and it's going to be a massive DPS increase for your Shadow Dagger procs. Finally, you want to really make sure you are using a Chris as your dagger base, simply because we do not need any critical strike chance in this build. We only need critical strike multiplier due to Shadow Daggers always critting. So the up to 80% multiplier of Chris is a great way to put this build together. Otherwise, the only other thing to keep in mind, other than getting health and resistances and armor and dodge on your suffixes, is to make sure you get yourself 2 rings with the hybrid throwing damage and reduced throwing mana cost roll on it. This roll is going to be highly crucial for this build to succeed because net with Sever Tricks is going to make it cost quite a decent amount of mana. And while your Falconry's Hunter Spoils is going to take care of the majority of the mana problems for you, you do need to make sure you also have the throwing mana cost roll on there to make net not cost 1,000,000 mana. Gearing overall for this build is going to be very simple, and because we don't need any specific suffixes, we can just fit a lot of resistances all over the place. The one thing I want to very quickly mention here is that most of your idol slots are going to be completely useless in this build because they're not any good rogue based idols. All we're going to want to do is just use a bunch of generic idols that have health and resistances on it all over the place. Ligonian idols are great because of the elemental rolls that it offers, while at the same time, Eterian idols are great because they can give you necrotic resistance, physical resistance, and void resistance if that's what you're missing. Finally, you can potentially add in some large shadow idols because they have a very large and chunky health roll on it, as well as it potentially offering you a lot of elemental resistance. Use your idols to fill in any sort of gaps you might have in your resistances, and don't worry too much about any other stats on them. Now, the final thing to mention about all of our gear is going to be the one unique item that we actually want to use in this build, and that is going to be Cradle the Erased. Now, Cradle the Erased is going to be a very interesting item that we're going to abuse in a very unique way. What Cradle the Erased does is it will give you stacks of golden ages every second you have it equipped. And these stacks are going to massively increase your block chance. Now, every time you actually block, you are going to lose a stack of golden ages, effectively attempting to turn Cradle of the Erased into a way where you can consistently get blocked without you always having it active when you are in high hit situations. Well, we don't care about the whole losing stacks of golden ages when we block because we're never going to actually block. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be picking up Deflect and Weave on our passive tree. What Deflect and Weave is going to do is it's going to turn all of our block chance into Glancing Blow chance. So what that means is all of the block chance from Cradle of the Erased is going to give us at a minimum 56% free Glancing Blow chance, allowing us to get to 100% Glancing Blow chance with no problem. And because it just makes it so we can never block, we'll never be able to actually lose a stack of golden ages, effectively taking care of half of the Glancing Blow chance for us for free. This is a really powerful shield because Glancing Blows just makes you take 35% less damage from everything. And if we weren't using the shield, the only other way for us to realistically get Glancing Blow cap is to go and specifically pick up Apostasy on our passive tree for Blade Dancer, or to stack a lot of Dust Shrouds, which we can't realistically do in this build very easily. Cradle the Erased is a very cool item because at the same time, it's also a Weaver item, which means when you equip the shield and go out and kill things in the world, it will be using up the Weaver's Will on it to randomly give you legendary potential mods on it. This can be very powerful, as that means your Cradle Erased all of a sudden could potentially have a very large health roll on it or a very large resistance roll on it, making the shield substantially better than it looks at first glance. The nice thing about Cradle Erased is that it's very common, meaning if you're playing this build in trade, it should be very cheap to buy one off the auction house very quickly. And because this is an item that can drop very early on, you could potentially find one yourself or just be able to buy one for very cheap, as there should be quite a lot of these available on the auction house. Now, if you're playing this in SSF, or if you just want to get one yourself, if you don't want to buy one, getting one is really easy. This is one of the most common items in the game. And if you were to specifically go to Black Sun, you could go and farm it out there by doing the unique or set shield nodes. This shield is straight up unbeatable, and there's nothing else that we'd actually want to use in our shield slot except for this specific shield, just due to the sheer power of it. And that's all there is to this build. I am so excited to play this build on launch. Originally, I was going to play Chaotic Fissure Warlock as my starter build, but after putting this build together with my stream and us theory crafting this as a way to play Umbral Blades without the annoying portions of Umbral Blades, I got so excited about this build that I want to play this over anything else for the first season launch. I am very excited to play this, and I will be updating this with any sort of new tech that we come up with as the season progresses, and any sort of new and interesting updates and tech that we can come up for the build. If you do decide to play this build, I hope you have fun with it. This build is going to look incredibly fun to play. It's going to tear through monoliths at a very, very fast rate simply due to the low cooldown of aerial assault. I just think Falconer in general is going to be a class that a lot of people are going to be interested in playing, and I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of fun with. If you have any questions on anything covered in Sky Kitties, please feel free to leave a comment in the description below. I'll be more than happy to help you as soon as I can. If you want to come by my Twitch and watch me play this on launch, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions for you live. Or if you just want to come hang out with the kitties, I'll be more than happy to see you as a part of our community. Other than that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you kitties in the next video.